Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1:01, so I think we'll get started. I wanted to go over a little housekeeping. My name is Nancy Friedel, and I'm the Director of Technology and Chairman of the National Technology Committee. National Technology Committee is to different functional areas, one being Chapter Hub and Salesforce, another being the website, and then one focusing on Office 365 or Google Apps, which we are just beginning to work with. So on the call today, presenting most of the presentation will be Carol, and she heads up the Salesforce Chapter Hub area. A few things about Gotowebinar if you're not familiar with it. You have a dashboard that you can look at, and next to your name it has different icons. The first icon is a microphone, and right now everyone on the call is muted. If you have a question, if you go over to the fourth icon that it looks like a hand, if you raise your hand, we will unmute you, and unless you have self-muted yourself, you'll be able to speak. If you've clicked to mute yourself, you'll have to unmute yourself, and you can ask a question. If you don't want the dashboard taking up a lot of room on your screen, up near the X that you would use, which you shouldn't do, to quit, there is a box that has arrow in it, and that will undock it and make it smaller so it's not taking up as much room on your screen. So that's pretty much the things you might need to know just about Gotowebinar. This webinar is focusing on paying dues, because most of you are now starting to receive dues from your chapter. And we've been using Salesforce since October of 2015, when we migrated from the prior Razor's Edge platform. And we started the new dues processing last spring, spring of 2016. And up until now, most of the focus has been on you entering people into Chapter Hub and paying dues to National. One of the things, or some of the things we're going to be focusing on in the coming year, is how we can make Chapter Hub of more value to the chapter as a membership database for themselves, and the potential of opening it up for donor management and event management. But we're still investigating all that would need to be done to make that happen. But I do have a poll that I want to take before we start, and one is basically asking you if you would be interested in using Chapter Hub for donor management or event management for your chapter. I know some chapters have a package they've been using and they're quite happy with it. Others are using spreadsheets or home-written databases and would like to do something else. So I'm going to launch the poll, and if you would just respond as to whether or not you would. No, because you're already using something else. No, you're just not interested. Maybe, or don't know. Okay, we have 72% of the people responding. So far, it shows that, I guess, do I stop it first? So far, it shows that 22% of you, 20% of you say yes, 10% say no because they're using another platform, 5% not interested, 50% maybe, and 14% don't know. So that gives, thank you, that just gives us an idea of whether people would have an interest. And there would never be any, you would never have to do it. This is only if you chose to do it. So I have one other poll. So I'm going to close that one. And I have one other, and that is just asking you what computer operating system you use, whether you're on Windows 10, Apple, Windows prior to 10, or you don't know. Okay, so we have 56% on Windows 10 and 20% on Apple, 20% on Windows prior to Windows 10, and 4% don't know. So thank you. That just helps me in knowing how to do some documentation. So I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to turn the session over to Carol. And as we said, if you have a question during this session, just click on the hand next to your name in that column, and we will ask you your question, let you ask your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carol Warman. I'm a member of the National Technology Committee. I'm also a member of the Las Vegas chapter. Before we get to dues processing, we will cover a few other basics in Chapter Hub. Hopefully this will help clarify any misconceptions that may be out there. So let's begin by logging in. First thing I'm going to do is take down my sign. And hopefully you can all see my desktop. And I'm going to open Chapter Hub. Now, you may get to this website differently. I have it as a shortcut on my desktop. This is Windows 10. So I'm going to just double click it. Some of you may have it as a bookmark in Internet Explorer or Chrome or Firefox or whatever browser you are using. So in my case, it comes up with the URL already filled in. The URL is, if we look up here, https://assistanceleague.force.com/login. Now you can see that I've used a few different logins to log into Chapter Hub. For the purposes of this webinar, we're going to use Test Chapter. And all of the people, names you will see in Test Chapter are fictitious, no real people here. So I'm going to click on this. Now you'll notice that this looks like an email address, altestchapter@assistanceleague.org, but it's really not. It's what they call a username. So I'm going to click on it. And because I access this so often, I have the password built in. I'm using the Chrome browser. You may use whatever browser is your favorite. I have the password built in. If I did not have the password built in, I would type it in at this point. So the password is in there. The username is altestchapter@assistanceleague.org. And your username would look similar. It would be al, whatever your chapter name is, @assistanceleague.org. So I'm going to log in. And this is the home page of Chapter Hub. As Nancy mentioned, Salesforce is actually the name of the database product. It's the platform on which Chapter Hub was built. The consultants that the National Assistance League engaged back in 2015 to migrate from Razor's Edge to Salesforce gave the chapter section of Salesforce the name Chapter Hub. So hence the name Chapter Hub. And you can see up here, I'm logged in as AL of Test Chapter. You would be logged in as AL of whatever your chapter name is. So the first thing we're going to do before we get to dues is we're going to add a new fourth quarter member. This is something that we've been asked, especially since we're in the fourth quarter now, March, April, May. This is something we've been asked about a lot. I get a lot of questions from Chapter Hub administrators. you folks out there in the field, about how to add a new fourth quarter member and what to do about dues. So the first thing we're going to do is add a new fourth quarter member, and we're going to call her Nancy New Member. The first thing we do before we add a new member is we search to make sure she does not already exist. We type her name in the search box, Nancy New Member, and we click search. She does not exist. So we're good to go as far as entering her as a new individual. If she already existed, that would mean she was probably a member of another chapter, and we would handle that separately. But for purposes of this webinar, she does not exist, and we're now going to create a new member, a new record for Nancy New Member. So I click on Individuals, and I click on New. Record type of new member is member. Leave that as it is. Click Continue. And this is the template or the screen for a new individual. We type in her name and her last name. Now you will note required fields in Salesforce, aka Chapter Hub, are all denoted by a vertical red bar to the left of the field box. The only really required field for this record is the last name. However, if you had, for example, her phone number and her email address, you might put that in. What we're going to do is put in a dummy phone number, and we're going to put in an email address. The reason we're going to put in an email address is because this is important if we want her to be able to access our chapter's website or the national website. So we're going to say nancyn@gmail.com. This is all fictitious, of course. So we've got the basic information in for Nancy New Member, and we're going to click Save. Now this is just one piece of adding a new member. Okay. We are now going to create, this is the important piece, and this is the piece that shows that she's a fourth quarter new member. We're going to create what's called a membership affiliation record. To do that, we hover the mouse over where it says organization affiliations. Right now it says 0. I click on that. It takes me down here, and I click on New Organization Affiliation. And the record type of new record is membership, so we leave that as it is. Now, the first thing we have to do is make her primary to the test chapter. So the first thing I do is check the primary box. The role, we'd like you to put in either voting or non-voting. So in this case, we'll put in voting. The type is a drop-down list. Again, this is a required field noted by the red bar. She's going to be a full member. Her first membership date will be, let's say, March 1st. The last chapter dues pay date was March 1st. And she paid the chapter, let's say, $10, just to cover the rest of the year. Now, the next thing, we go over to these fields on the right. You will notice her name is already filled in. We don't do anything with that. When we go to the organization, there's a little confusion here. What we want to do is we want to put in her chapter, but we need to find her chapter in the system. We can't just type it in, unfortunately. So there are two ways of doing this. One way is just to simply start typing in test, and it shows you my recent items, Assistance League of Test Chapter Parent. We don't want that one, but we do want this one, Assistance League of Test Chapter. So that's one easy way of filling in the chapter name. There's another way, which happens to be my favorite, but I'm going to erase that. The other way is by clicking the magnifying glass right over here. Another window opens up, This is a lookup field. So we type in test and go, and we will see that Assistance League of Test Chapter is right here. What we want is we want to pick the type that says chapter under type and AL chapter under record type. So this is the one we want. And now the chapter is filled in. So we've got all these things on top filled in, and the only thing left is to fill in her chapter dues paid through date, which is the end of your chapter's fiscal year. In this case, the chapter's fiscal year ends on May 31st. So we've got everything filled in now. She's a voting member. She's primary to the Assistance League of Test Chapter, full member, first membership date 3/1/17, last chapter dues paid 3/1/17. She paid $10, and her chapter dues are paid through 5/31/17. And now I'm going to click Save. Okay, organization affiliation has been saved. Now again, now I hover over organization affiliations, and this time it says 1 because I just created the 1 membership affiliation record. And just in case you're wondering what the membership affiliation record looks like, you can click on View, or you can click on the affiliation name, and you will see what it looks like. If I click on View, these are all the fields we typed in, and these are some fields that the system puts in automatically down here. You don't have control of them. Now you will notice, let me go back to Nancy. Her status is now active. The reason it's active is because this is a 4th quarter member. She started on March 1st. March, April, May, no dues are owed to National for members starting in March, April, May. So she's active. She's good to go. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is a field that we also get some questions about. It's another field, has a similar sounding name to organization. It's called Organization Household Name. And it's this field right here. It's automatically created by the system. You can see how it created it. When I put the last name in, it created the household name as last name, space, left paren, first name, right paren, space, and then the word household. There is no need for you to change this. We've gotten some questions from the chapters where you tried to change it and you ran into problems. So let me show you what happens if you try to change it, which you shouldn't. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to edit. Now let's pretend that we thought we had to change the organization household name. We don't, but let's say we did. And I thought, oh gee, I better put in my chapter. Now watch what happens when you click on Save. Okay, you're going to get a red error message. Chapter Hub admins are not allowed to change organization household name. Easy, right? So we just cancel out of this and we leave the organization household name just as the system created it. Also, let's go back to Nancy's individual record right here. You notice that since we created the membership affiliation record and we made her primary to test chapter, that information bubbled up or was filled in automatically on her individual record. We didn't fill it in when we added her individual record, but by making her affiliation record primary to test chapter, it also propagated right here.
Carol?
Yes.
One thing you might mention is that throughout Chapter Hub or Salesforce, anytime you see a field underlined, it means if you click on it, it's going to open that record.
Right, that's a hyperlink. That's a hyperlink. Right. So that's how I got to Nancy Newmember's household record. Good point. Those are hyperlinks just as you're used to hyperlinks in any other context. Next, we're going to examine the various roster reports. We want to see who's in this test chapter. So how do we do that? The first way the way we see who's in the test chapter is by clicking on Organizations Households and clicking on the Go button. You also can use the search box. The search box is always, as I say, your best friend. So if I type in test chapter, you can see it comes up with Assistance League of Test Chapter. Okay. Now the other way of getting there, that's one way of getting to the chapter page. The other way is here. View My Chapter Organizations, click the Go button, and click on Assistance League of Test Chapter. And we get to the same place. Now let's review all the members who are affiliated with Test Chapter. One way to do that, there are a number of ways of doing that. Over here we see this affiliated contacts, 5+. If I click on that, it takes me down here. It shows the first 5 affiliated contacts. If I click on this, go to list 15, it shows me all 15 members who are associated with Test Chapter. Now this list at the moment is sorted in alphabetical order by last name. It also shows the type of member, whether they're full member, lifetime member, assistee, and I've got a few other record types in here, board committee and 3 board committee records. That is not going to be discussed in this webinar, but stay tuned. We will probably be giving another webinar to discuss board committees in the context of Chapter Hub. You can sort on any one of these columns. For example, if you wanted to sort it by first name, you could do that. Last name, record type. It's got the 3 board committee, and then the rest are membership. Status. So we've got these active members. The board committees are a little different. As I said, we're not going to talk about them. And then we have a few members in here whose names I've given to indicate what their status is. Irene, inactive. Linda, lapsed. Rhonda, resigned. We'll get to them in a minute. But anyway, this is a way of seeing who is in your chapter.
Carol, one other point, if they click on a column heading a second time, it will change it from ascending to descending.
Right, that's what we call a toggle. Click it once, as Nancy said, it's in ascending. Click it again, it's in descending. So let's go back to the chapter page. And in this section here called Custom Links, we've got a number of different reports for you to see. If I first look at Chapter Roster All Time, a new window opens, and I see all the membership records in here. The board committee records are not shown in here. So I've got 12 membership records, and here they are. This is sorted by last name. This includes Nancy Newmember, the one we just put in, who is affiliated to Test Chapter. We have chapter members lapsed, and we have in that lapsed status, we have one member, Linda, lapsed, and we'll talk about her in a little while. In the inactive category, we have Irene, inactive. We'll get to her later. And in the resigned category, we have Rhonda, resigned. Now, let's go back to the resigned report for a minute. We have Rhonda in here. Let's click on Rhonda's name. This just shows you how we indicated she is a resigned member. It's going to bring up her record. This is her contact or individual record. Organization affiliations. Hover over that. Click. and she's got one membership affiliation record and status is resigned. Why is the status resigned? I'm going to just look at it. How did we resign her? We checked this box on the membership affiliation record. And one other important point, if you resign a member or, God forbid, a member dies, is deceased, we want to leave this primary checkbox checked. And that's the reason for that is if they made any donations in the past, we want to preserve that history. So we don't have any deceased members in here, but we do have Rhonda resigned. And that's how we resigned her. We checked the box. I'll do it again. Box is checked. And the primary box is checked as well. She's still primary to test chapter even though she's resigned. Likewise for deceased members. So I've shown you the different report types. At your leisure, you can explore in here, play around. We've got some other reports that might be useful to you. Chapter roster compact, and chapter members active. At your leisure, as I said, just play around and see what information is in there. Well, guess what? We're finally up to dues processing. And how did we get there? Well, you can see we're on the chapter homepage, but in case we were off on another page, let's say we were on Rhonda Resigns record, and we wanted to get to the dues processing, we go back to the organization's households, click on My Chapter Organizations, click on Assistance League of Test Chapter, and in the Custom Links section, we have Update Pay Dues. Click on that. And what we see here are these members, these records.
Carol?
Yes.
We have a question before you.
Yeah.
And it says, how do you switch a full member individual to change to a community volunteer information? Is there any way to avoid rekeying in data? You would not change once a member, always a member. We will have other ways. Right now, we don't have you put in community volunteers. That's one of the enhancements we were talking about. But the way you would do it, that would be the affiliation to your chapter. She would then show as having been a member from one date to another date, and then in the future when we allow you to use different types, she would be a community volunteer for a future time.
Right, that's a good point. We don't have community volunteers in here yet.
But we will.
But we will. Absolutely. Okay.
And let me just see if does that answer your question, Eve? I've unmuted you.
Yes, it does. So I shouldn't, I was able to add, didn't look locked down to me. I just saw that there were no individuals of type community volunteer, and so I was going to do some uploading, but maybe there's a point where it won't let me do that.
We'll check into that, but if you could hold off on that until we enable that feature, if it isn't locked down, we'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so let's continue with dues processing. We got to this page. Now on this page, we have all members who are active and lapsed, and active and lapsed members are the only members that show on this screen. So we've got all of these are active except for Linda lapsed. The others are all active. Now you might ask, what's the difference between lapsed and inactive? A lapsed member has paid dues to the chapter within the past year, so that she's considered lapsed. That status is automatically put in by the system. If she has not paid dues to the chapter within the past year, she's considered inactive. And we have one inactive member, and you will see she's not on this list. The reason she's not on this list is because she's inactive, and we're only showing active and lapsed members on this list at this point. So what I'd like to do, I'd like to leave this screen for a minute I'd like to go to our inactive member, whose name is Irene Inactive. I'm using the search box, my best friend. Here she is under individuals. I click on her name. I look at organization affiliations, hover the mouse. There's one organization affiliation record, and you can see the last dues pay date were through 5/31/15. So she's considered inactive. What do we do in a situation like that? We leave that affiliation record alone, and we create a new one. I said new organization affiliation record, type membership. She's primary. She's voting. She's a full member. And her first membership date is going to be today, 3/28. Last chapter dues paid 3/28. And she paid the chapter $5 to cover the cost of a badge or whatever. We go back to the organization box. Again, we have to fill in the chapter name here, but we can't just type it in, as I showed you before when we created Nancy New Members Affiliation Record. So I'm going to click on the magnifying glass, and I'm going to pick Assistance League of Test Chapter is right on top. Click on it, and her chapter dues paid through is 5/31/2017. Click on Save. And now organization affiliation has been saved. Hover over organization affiliations, and now you see the primary is now the affiliation record I just created. Start date 3/28, end date 5/31. She is now active in the chapter. And now I would like to go back to my chapter homepage, and you will see that Irene Inactive should be listed on that page because she's now active. Update pay dues. Again, we are recording this, by the way. We recorded last week's session, and we are recording this session as we speak. And so if you have to go back and refer to anything, of course you can always write to us, but we will be sending out the link to the recording as soon as it's ready to be sent out. So here she is, Irene Inactive. She's now on the list. Why is she on the list? Because she's active. Because we just added a second affiliation record to her individual record. Now I'd like to review each field on this screen. First of all, there's a checkbox next to the name. The type field is the drop-down list here. You can actually change their record, their type. You can change any of these fields instead of going into the affiliation record and editing it. This is kind of a shortcut, and it's an easy shortcut, especially if you have a lot of them to do. For the moment, we're going to leave this as it is, but you can see it's got the same choices we had when we entered an affiliation record. Voting, primary, first membership date, we leave that alone. Last chapter dues date, chapter dues paid through, national dues paid through. Now you will see these are all 5 national dues paid through 5/31/17, except for Linda Lapsed, who is 5/31/16. Now what I'm going to do to illustrate a few features on this screen is I'm going to change the chapter dues paid through date, this column here, to 5/31/18. These people are all prompt with paying their dues, and they have paid their dues for next year. So I'm going to say 5/31/18. Now, I could have gone into each one of these individual records and changed them, but I want to show you a very useful feature on this screen that will enable you to do a mass, what we call a mass update of this field to as many records as you check off. So I'm going to check off 3 members, Joan Abbott, Andrews, Holly Andrews, and Alexa Ayoto. Joan is a full member. Holly is a lifetime member, and you will see how that plays out in a minute. And Alexa is an assist team. So I want to change, these 3 have paid their dues, but let's say it wasn't just 3, let's say it was 30 or 100 who had paid their dues. By checking the appropriate members in this column and putting chapter dues paid through 5/31/18 in this column, we have a new button, not so new, but a button, apply header values to selected. When I click on this, you will see that for the 3 records I've selected, chapter dues paid through is changed to 5/31/18. So I'm going to click on this button now, processing, and here it is, 5/31/18, Holly Andrews 5/31/18, and Alexa 5/31/18. Now, so we've said, okay, these members have paid their dues to the chapter. Now we want to pay national for them. And now,
Carol, you might mention that you can also do the same thing with the last chapter dues
right,
paid date
right,
and the dues amount.
right. Any of these fields here that are open in this header box, you can do the same thing as Nancy said. So I just chose to update this field, but I could have updated the last chapter dues pay date. And, well, as a matter of fact, let me put in today's date for the last chapter dues paid date, 3/28/17. I still have these selected. Click Apply Header Values. And now the last chapter dues paid date has been updated for the 3 selected records, Joan, Holly, and Alexa.
And one other shortcut is that you see the 3/28/2017 to the right of the field. If you click on that, it will put today's date in without your keying it in.
Right. Okay, so now we're ready. We've updated their chapter records. And now we're going to continue to national dues. And the 3 records, the 3 members who paid their dues to the chapter are now ready to be paid to national. Dues for them are ready to be paid to national. Chapter dues paid through 5/31/18 for the 3 of them. Now, Joan is a full member. Her dues are $40 to national from the chapter. I'll skip Holly for a minute. Alexa is an assist team. Dues for from the chapter to national for her for the next year are $10. Holly is a lifetime member. She is grandfathered, and so no dues are due to the to national from the chapter. However, we have to include them as if we were paying in this list so that they're advanced in the system. Sounds odd, but we have to do that so that their national dues paid through date does get updated to indicate that they're still members, for one thing. So now we want to pay dues for these 3 people. The total due would be $50, 40 and 10, 0 for Holly. And the way we say which members we're going to pay for is by either clicking the individual boxes here, or let me unclick them, uncheck them. Clicking this one automatically checks the 3 of them. Now, Nancy, you might want to say a few words about when they do this. You can wait until the end of the year to do this, closer to May 31st, to submit an order, which is what we're doing now, for 2017-18. If you get new members in during the year, again, we're closer to the end of the year now, you should really be paying at the end of the month or sooner if they want the member to access the national website. Remember, until the chapter pays dues for them, they cannot access the national website. And we've gotten some questions on that too. So I've checked all 3. Even Holly, who's a lifetime member, got a checker. Click continue. Okay, so now we have created an order 1152-000-001152 for $50. We saw that $50 was the right total. Dues payments are for these 3 members. On the bottom, this is correct. If you want to print this for your records, you can click on this custom link where it says Print Export. A new window will open, and you can click on Printable View. And this report, this is a Salesforce, what we call a report, is created in an Excel format. I click on the downloaded file, and here's the report, which you can now print just the way you print any other Excel file. So you'll definitely want to do that before you proceed.
And we recommend that you send it to your treasurer to get their approval before you pay.
Okay. So now we're almost there. We're not quite there. We've created the order, and now we have to pay for it. We have this link called Payment Console. It's up here. Same link is down here. So we can click on either one. And a new window will pop up. Okay, now we have some fields in here, and you need to be very careful about what you enter in these boxes. You should have a voided check available and with you when you go to open this payment console. If you don't, you should, because it's got information on there, a routing number, bank account number, and the account name, and you need all of that. So the first name we put in as AL, and the last name is your test chapter. Is your chapter name, sorry. Test chapter in this case. Please do not put your name in these boxes. We have had people who do that, and it just causes more work for Nancy, who has to go back and research all this and says, well, Mary Smith, what chapter is she with? Okay, now there are fields for address line 1, address line 2, city, state, zip, but we really don't need those. The only thing we really would ask that you fill in is your email address, so you get a confirmation that the payment has gone through. And we'll put in testchapter@gmail.com, whatever your chapter's email, whatever email address you want to use goes in the email box. Again, the charge amount is $50. The routing number, another really important field. Routing number is 9 digits, no more, no less. So I'm going to put in 9 digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the account would be, for example, it depends, the length of the account number depends upon the bank. So I'm going to put in just a random account number. Account name, this is the name on your bank statement. So it would be, for example, and the bank name, let's say Wells Fargo, and whether this is a checking or a savings account. So let's say it's a checking account. Nancy, did you want to add anything about the fields on this screen?
Not about the fields in particular, other than that voided check. You should have circled what the routing number is and identified, and the account number, because oftentimes with the account number they append the check number, and you don't want to include that in your account number.
Right. So now I've confirmed all this information. I have the voided check right in front of me, and I'm going to click Charge. Thank you for your payment. Thank you for using Chargent. Close. And now, the next part of our webinar, we're going to discuss order processing. And this is kind of a good segue into order processing, which Nancy will cover.
Okay, Carol, could you click on AL orders?
Of course.
So as you see, you have a header there for AL orders. And with any tab, there are certain views that are predefined for you. It will automatically bring up any recent orders you've worked with. But if you click on that arrow, we have orders that are awaiting payment, meaning you created the order but it hasn't been submitted yet. You can click on that, Carol, because we should have one. You should have the one you just created.
Completed orders?
No, awaiting. Oh, you completed it. That's right, you did.
Yeah.
So it's showing as a completed order. The other ones that are available there as drop down are all orders. If you want to see all orders for your chapters since last year, there aren't many in here for us. There's just the one.
Test chapter.
And because it's a test chapter, and then you can, there's a view for returned or rejected or returned orders. So what happens is if you submit an order and it's rejected because of a bad routing number, or it's returned because of a bad account number, the reject, usually what I have to do is go into the payment processor and see if any of the records rejected. If they do, I come back and update the order to say that it rejected. It backs off as if you never made the payment, so the people are not active anymore. And then we're looking to automate this, but right now I send an email to you telling you to double check your routing number and account number and go in and go to that same order, go to Payment Console and resubmit, repay for it with the correct routing number and account number. Returned means it passed the test for the bank, but when it got to the bank, the account number was invalid. That can sometimes take a week to 2 weeks before we get notice that it didn't clear the bank. And we do, National does get charged $3.50 for every returned order. It's gotten a lot better. We've had in the past, when we first started, we had the same order rejected or returned. I think one was as many as 5 times. And it really comes down to knowing, having the correct routing number and account number. The other thing, the orders awaiting payment. Let's say you go in and create an order, and then before you pay it, you have dues from a couple more members, and you decide to create a new order. Well, that one awaiting payment sits out there and you can't delete it. We purposely did that because we didn't want, we had situations where orders were being deleted that had activity associated with them. So if you want an order deleted, you can notify Chapter Hub at assistanceleague.org or technology at assistanceleague.org and we'll delete it. After 2 months, if an order is sitting there waiting payment, we will automatically delete it. The other times we've deleted it, in fact, just yesterday I was going in and looking at orders and I saw 3 orders for the same amount for the same chapter, and when I looked at the detail, they were paying for the same members, and the last one was completed. So I deleted the 2 awaiting payments so there'd be no chance that you might submit that order and pay again for those people. The other thing that Treasurer will be doing is that we run a report that shows anybody who basically where your chapter dues paid through date is greater than your national dues paid through date, meaning they've paid the chapter but you haven't paid national yet. Other than during this 4th quarter, we would run that report, and if it's been more than a month, you will get an invoice from the treasurer or an email. And inadvertently, the last time she sent one out, she asked people to send a check. We don't want any checks. We want you to go in and pay through the normal process, but you might get one of those emails if you're delinquent. But as Carol mentioned, in this 4th quarter, you can wait until the end of May. It's due by June 1st to actually pay for those orders. So if you're a chapter that has another membership database that you're using where you're tracking the dues to your chapter, you could, and you are in the nice position that everyone has paid for the chapter, so you want to pay for everyone that owes to national, then you can go to that screen, select, when you go to pay dues to national, select everyone, and we'll go in first, update their information for the new paid through date, and then just pay them all at once. Or you can go in as the dues come in. It's entirely up to you, but it is due by June 1st, and if but you, as I say, can do it earlier. So Carol, there's nothing else. We do have a question that we'll get to, but
I did want to mention one other thing, and that concerns written documentation. We have a lot of requests for written documentation, and I would just like to spend a minute or two showing you how to get there. While you're still logged into your chapter hub under your chapter name, click on the Chatter tab. And a few days ago, I posted this document that describes, let me open it up. It describes how you find the written documentation, which would basically be everything we've just discussed here. Dear Chapter Hub administrators, if you're looking for the latest Chapter Hub documentation, please click on this link. Let me scroll over and follow the steps below. This link will take you to the national website, and I'm told if you log into the national website first and then you click on this link, you get taken right to the page. Otherwise, if you click on the link without being logged into the national website, well, that's the way it's supposed to work. Log into the national website and follow these steps. Click on committee pages, technology, scroll down until you see technology resource library. And please contact us, Chapter Hub at assistanceleague.org, if you have any questions. If you have documentation in your possession and you're not certain if it's the latest version, I suggest that you destroy it and go back to the resource library where we know that the latest versions are posted. And Nancy, did you say there was a question?
yes. We have a question. Can you upload a spreadsheet to Chapter Hub with member information? Thought Chapter Hub was supposed to end the laborious process of individually entering each member that old system had. We do not currently, we converted all the people who were in the prior system into the new system, but because there are restrictions on fields, and we do not allow you to upload a spreadsheet to Chapter Hub with member information. You have to enter them individually at this time. And we had a question, just to remind the listeners to check with their chapter treasurer before initiating payment. We highly recommend you send that report to your treasurer and get their okay before you submit a payment.
Or maybe even have the treasurer sitting with you while you're doing this. That would be an ideal situation.
Okay, and another question is, how do I set the new member as active for the affiliation? I have associated individual, but when I view the full list of contacts, my new member records are blank for status. I do not show a field for status when I edit their affiliation. The status field is automatically generated. So if you pay, you have a chapter status and you have a national status. When you update the chapter dues paid through date, if it is later than today, this chapter status is active. When you pay the dues to national, and the national dues paid through date is greater than today, the status is active. So that was,
In other words, you don't fill in the status. The system fills in the status based on the dates that you enter.
and that was Kathy, and she has her hand raised. Does that answer your question, Kathy?
I was asking for confirmation that national dues for the current year are $0 for members who joined March 1st through May 31st.
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
And Eve, I unmuted the wrong person first. 1 second here. So Eve, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I thought it might be something like that. So when I go to thinking back to the instructions for how to pull the list of all the, I think you used active and lapsed members so that I could enter their dues. Since these members don't have the active status, how am I going to pay how am I going to fill in their,
If you would email us the details, which chapter are you from?
AL Seattle.
Okay, so if you would just send an email to chapterhub@assistanceleague.org with the details, we'll be happy to look into that, and either I or Nancy will get back to you.
And one thing that coincidentally came up last night was something where we might want to create a new report is that if your members are currently active and they've paid dues for the next fiscal year, there's currently no report that tells you who hasn't paid dues because they're active until May 31st.
Yeah, that's this condition. Okay.
So we can, there's a couple ways to do that, but Carol and I will discuss it, and we will either come up with a new report that you could run, or we'll find some other way so that you can tell which people have actually paid dues for next year, because they're all showing active because they paid for this current year.
Thanks.
Okay, and then I wanted to go to, let's see. Well, I'm trying to unmute Jennifer, but it's not letting me. I just wanted to see, I know you didn't like the answer, but if that answered your question. Yeah, it's not letting me unmute you. Let's see if there's any more.
She's self-muted.
Okay. And I have another question from hand raised from Yvonne Smith. You have a question? Do you have, Yvonne, do you have a question? Okay. And I still show Kathy with your hand raised. I don't know if it's a new question or if it was the old question.
It was the old question.
Okay. And let's see if I see anyone else here. Jennifer, can you hear me now?
I can.
So I know you didn't like the answer, but did I answer your question?
No, it's not the matter of not liking it. It's just, and I understand, like you said, there's many fields and it can be difficult, but it sounds like it's something the system can do.
Correct.
It's that we can't setting the field. So it would seem to me that if National could come up with a set of fields, it might be something to work towards, because we work with another platform and it would be much easier for us to upload a spreadsheet from that to send to Chapter Hub.
And are you talking about, see, the part of the issue is that the first thing you should do before you add a member is, as Carol indicated, is to check to see if the member already exists, because we have many instances where a member is a member of 2 chapters at one time, or they moved and have belonged to other chapters. So that would not be a new record. You would be adding an affiliation to that existing record so that that person's history of all the chapters they belong to and the donations they've made would stay. If we're uploading a file, it's hard to make that distinction because the first and last names could be the same, but it might be somebody else.
Also,
so there's a, go ahead.
I was just going to add, when you edit the information online using these screens, there are edits that you don't see behind the screens that edit for example, state codes have to be 2-character. We just recently instituted that. So if we just uploaded it from a file, you know, we would be bypassing those edits. There might be a way around that, but at the moment, as Nancy said, not really. But there are a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. Nancy and I know all too well what they are. And as I said, there are a lot of edits that, for example, as I showed you earlier, the organization household name. We had a number of people think that they needed to put their chapter name in there. And before we put the edits in, the rule that the message, the error message that I showed you before, we had people changing that name and causing some problems. So that's why we put the rule in that said that you are not allowed to change that field. The system creates it automatically and we just leave it alone. My point is there are a lot of edits that go on behind the scenes here. Any other questions? I see a hand raised by Ed Hayes.
Is my turn?
I'm trying to unmute you, Ev.
Oh, hi. I don't know if I raised my hand, but I do have a question. I don't know if it's appropriate for here. Is there a report that I can use to pull the information that's stored in an individual's volunteer status? Sorry, not volunteer status, but the volunteer notes, where we can track the different skills and interests and report on that?
Nancy?
Sorry, I had muted myself. At this time, you can enter skills, and those are such that you can, they're from a drop-down list and you can select multiple. If you would send us an email with a request for report on volunteer, we can create things. We just don't want to create reports before if people aren't going to use them. So just let us know what you would like to see on that and we can take a look at it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, who is this?
This is Sue at A.O. Austin.
Okay.
You put again the difference between inactive and lapsed?
Okay. Basically, what was happening was that we had members who, let's say they joined in 2014 and they were a member for a year, and then they came back in 2016. And the way that the system works when you pay dues, it uses that national dues paid through date and advances it 1 year. So we had the situation where you thought you were paying for the current year, but you were paying for the prior year. So we instituted a status called inactive, which means that they've been lapsed for more than a year. And if they've been lapsed for more than a year, they now don't even show up for you to be able to pay them, because we don't think you want to go back and pay for them for every year they've been gone. And that was the situation where Carol explained that you would leave their inactive record alone and you would create a new one with their first membership date as a rejoin date when they join again, and then it will only charge them for the current year. Does that make sense?
This is the example. This was the example that we worked on, Irene Inactive, and we left her original affiliation record intact, and we added a second one with her start date is today end date 5/31, and now she's showing as active.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. And then we have a question from Ashley. Let me unmute you, Ashley. And her question is, when discussing households, do you want to bring up assistees being a member along with another household member? The households, I don't know if you understand the concept of the household, and we're not using it too much yet, but the purpose is that when it comes to the time that we are maybe using this as a donor management system and we want to send out a letter, we probably would, if there's a husband and wife that are members or assistees, you would probably want to send one letter to the household. And if you want to associate an assistee with the parent household, if you contact Chapter Hub or Technology at assistanceleague.org, we can do that for you. But right now, we had too many problems when people were editing the organization household field themselves. It was causing us more problems. It's easier to handle the requests than it was to deal with the problems. Does that answer your question? Well, it wasn't a question, it was just discussion.
I have husband and wife members, and I have several assistees, and I do have them set up as households. But that may be because we were the test chapter for this.
Yes, before it was doing it, the way it's set up now, it won't, but we can always do it for you.
Yeah, we have a merge function where we can merge individual records into one household.
No, they're not talking about merging individual records.
Yeah, individual contacts.
Well, you would have to, if from now on, you're not allowing me to set up households. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
The households are set up, households are set up automatically. What we're not allowing is the Chapter Hub admins to change the household names.
So if you want to associate more than one person to the household, you would need to let us know, and we would edit the household to make it include the other people.
Okay, so I can't automatically add a member to a household then?
Right.
Correct.
Create them, let the system create their own household record, and then send us an email with the particulars, and we will merge them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And let's see. I see a couple showing us questions, but I think they've been answered. If somebody still has a question, unless I send a response to you in the question, it shows up. That's why some of you I send a response saying I'm just sending a response because we're discussing them rather than answering you through the question. But are there any other questions that anyone has? I'll unmute. Well, I guess I can't. I'll unmute. No, I'm trying to unmute everyone, but it's not letting me. So if there are no more questions, I don't see any more. Do you, Carol? Jean, I see one question. Jean Malley, you have a question? Maley?
Yes, would you confirm for me regarding the payment portal entry details? Is it true we don't need to enter the address at all of the bank, even the city that the bank is in?
Correct. That was for all you need is the first name being AL and the last name your chapter and an email address if you want to receive an acknowledgement. But we don't capture any credit card information, and we don't capture the address information. It gets sent to the payment processors, and that's for liability concerns. We don't ever see a masked out account number that might show a couple of the numbers, but we never see the entire number.
Okay.
Anybody else? Sue, oops. Sue, I show you as raising your hand. It may be an old question, but you must have muted yourself.
Yeah, there we go. Now,
okay.
Unmuted. off the topic of this, but how do I find information on scheduling through, I guess, Chapter Hub?
Scheduling, could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by scheduling?
Well, at conference, I attended part of the session.
Oh,
that,
the PTA scheduling?
Yes.
Okay, that is not part of Chapter Hub. That's the website. Nikki Grebe is working on that, and we just got an upgrade to that product, and she's working frantically to get the instructions written for that, and then I'm sure there will be an email coming out soon on that. But I can send her, this was Sue, I can send her that you're one that's interested in it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. And Donna Presley, you have a question?
Yes. You mentioned paying by credit card. I thought everything was like direct deposit. You couldn't pay by credit card. Is that correct?
It's all direct deposit. Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay.
If I said that, I didn't mean it.
That's what I thought. I thought, wait a minute, I didn't think we could pay that way. All right, that's all I was clarifying.
Okay. Eve Hayes, you have a question? Whoops.
I do have one. Someone mentioned this to me, and maybe you covered it before I came in. At some point, and maybe it's where the system flips the new member to active, is there a welcome email that's triggered from National, and does it include the instructions for how to log into National and then how to get a access to the chapter's login?
The only really outstanding issue we currently have with the website, everything is going very well with the website, but we are having a problem that certain email types are not seeming to receive the welcome emails. What is supposed to happen is that the first time you would get a welcome email, or if you said you forgot your password, you would get an email telling you to reset your password. We are looking at ways around it, going through a different email processor. That's our top priority. In the interim, if you have someone who can't get on, if you email either webmaster@assistanceleague.org or technology@assistanceleague.org, we can reset your password to whatever you want, and then they'll be able to log on. But it is a known problem, and it's one we're frantically trying to resolve.
Okay, so there is a trigger to send the email, but some recipients' email addresses have a problem receiving it. Is that
correct? Whether it's blocked by their website or their email host. So we're going to figure out how to use one that might not be blocked so often. And let's see. Does that answer it?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Who else do we have? I think that's it. If somebody still has one, click the raise hand so that I know that you still have a question. Other than that, I want to I'll let Carol wrap up, but I want to thank you for taking on the responsibility of Chapter Hub Administrator. We really appreciate your doing it, and we really try to help you in any way you can. So if you're running into difficulty, don't hesitate to contact us, and we can research to see what the problem might be. So Carol, is there anything you want to add before we?
No, I just wanted to thank everyone for taking an hour and a quarter out of your day and attending this webinar. We will be sending out the link to the recording either later today or more likely tomorrow. I think that's about it. We're going to stop the recording now, and we're going to